I'm in this place, as you know, in the South Bend where the culture is different, the people are different. You have folks who have never had interaction with Black people before on a campus such as Notre Dame. So a lot of different social norms weren't quite so normal for me. And I realized that because I was the only Black person in the program, that there was a need for me to be there. And
I'm just
while
going to go through a couple of items off his long list of accolades here. So, Mourja is a BET Sunday Best finalist, singer, songwriter. He's currently an assistant professor of music and African American studies at the Oxford College of Emory University, and also the first African American to earn a master's of sacred music and vocal performance from the University of Notre Dame. Man, that's like a lot. The first thing I want to ask you, I sort of have this thing where I ask cliche questions.
yeah,
I like cliche questions because I feel like questions that have stood the test of time have done so for a reason because they're useful.
very true.
So I just want to know, like, where did you get your start? What got you into music? What was that experience like?
I really don't think music was a choice. I just sort of grew up around it. I mean, in Defuniak Springs, Florida, I went to church with my mom. My grandma heard them sing. I watched uh, them sing on stage from time to time. They sang in the choir that I was over. It's funny now I think about it. I was their music director at 11 years old and had to listen to what I told them to do. But yeah, man, it's just one of those things where I was just thrown into the water and I just swam. But honestly, it was fun, and it still is fun.
Yeah, I I feel like there's a bit more to that. I feel like, what sort of kept you going? I'm sure that that was challenging just to do that on your own. Like, what do you feel like kept you going?
Honestly, the thing that kept me going was just my end goal, and my end goal was to earn my doctorate. My end goal was to work or have a career where I could not only just support me, but essentially like retire my mom. She could do what she wanted to do. So that was honestly like what always stayed in my mind. And plus, being at institutions where I went to school, where I didn't have to pay for it, like that was also something. So I'm like, this is a blessing. So I want to ensure that I get all of the resources while I'm here because otherwise I could be paying out of pocket. Yeah.
Did you have any like role models that you looked up to that you sort of like, modeled your path after?
At a young age, I had a mentor, still do. Oh, he's my godfather now, so godfather slash mentor, but Father Rudolph Clear. I was introduced to him when it was my last year at Walton High School. And then I also had my principal, Pastor Russell Hughes. So he was my pastor and my principal. So imagine it sent to the office. So those were some phenomenal men who were certainly in my life during that time. But I always found something in somebody that motivated me. But just staying in touch with them and seeing these black men in positions where they can make decisions really influenced a lot of my decisions when I was younger and still does now.
Yeah, sort of on that topic, like I feel like having especially like black role models is so important. And I don't know if you realize this yourself, but like you're a big role model. Like you were the first African American to graduate from Notre Dame, vocal performance, and get a Master of Sacred Music. What was that like? Like, tell me about that experience.
Ugh, it's funny. One, I never really considered myself a role model, but I guess I mean I accept that. So thank you. When I got to Notre Dame, I knew that I was on a mission, man. I knew I was going to be there for 2 years. It wasn't easy because I had nobody to bounce off of. I had nobody who looked like me who made it. And so I just did what I normally would do. I got into a space and I just made it my own. It was a little harder the first 2 years because I was or the first year I would say, because I was, guy moving from Jacksonville, Florida. And then I'm in this place, as you know, in the South Bend where the culture is different, the people are different. You have folks who have never had interaction with Black people before on a campus such as Notre Dame. So a lot of different social norms weren't quite so normal for me. And I realized that because I was the only Black person in the program, that there was a need for me to be there. And while I could not, and this before George Floyd, but while I could not answer every question to the remedy for the cure of racism, I knew that I could only bring my full self to the program, which was a bit difficult because I didn't know how much blackness they wanted. Did they want enough to say that they were in the presence of who was black and brought their culture, or they wanted all of the isms that come with being black? So yeah, so my first couple of years in Notre Dame during that my master's program was quite fulfilling, and then of course I moved on to my doctorate where I was coming more into myself, and I didn't back down for anything because I knew that I belonged there. So yeah, man.
So you went and you trailblazed this path. I wonder if you were to look back and if you're talking to someone who's in college and high school, maybe someone who's African American, someone who has doubts about whether they can succeed in what they want to do, what sort of advice would you give them?
I would say go to the places where they don't have enough of you. That is the most important thing. Do your research. And not saying that people shouldn't go to HBCUs. Because hey, go to them because that is an experience that was cultivated for us and by us. Essentially, I went to the place that was offering me the money because the money was the answer to the prayer that I made when I was an undergrad. Because I said, if God allowed me to go to school without a dime come out of my pocket for my 4 years, then every degree after this bachelor will be the same way. And so Notre Dame was the place that I could go to that was fully funded. And plus, I was creating history. And I didn't really know that before I got there. I realized that at Notre Dame, while I was in a new space, it was not hard to find what I needed. I helped our campus to appreciate more of Black music, of what we bring to the table, and how essentially people thrive and they benefit off of the things that we create. And so, with Bespoken, I created a space, and even before Bespoken, but I just created a space where Blackness was celebrated, and we weren't doing it to make people who were not affiliated with our community happy, but we essentially were in a space that was not welcoming of us years ago. And while that happened as I was a student there, I really hope that Notre Dame continues to be intentional with ensuring that they create spaces where we are welcome.
So let's talk a little more about that. So Bespoken, this is an oratorio that you composed, and I one of the songs that gave me goosebumps was "Who I Am," and I've always wanted to ask you, like, what was that process like writing that song? I felt like I identified a lot with a lot of things you said, and then more of that, the process behind that entire composition.
Yeah, so the song, I ain't gonna lie to you, man, that was a last minute song because I was trying to. We were stuck between two songs that I was going to send to Legacy to sing. So there was my song "Get Up," which she did, and then there was "Who I Am." And I wrote "Who I Am" because I was like, okay, let me think. Like I know she had like a bluesy kind of R&B style, so I said, how can I make this work? So I was thinking about some text, and I heard an interview with her and Tamron, and I was like, okay. So I'm going to write this song called "Who I Am" and take some nuggets of what I heard her say and what I've experienced as a Black man. So she ended up doing the other song. So I was like, all right, bet. Well, I'll just do this one. And it's funny because my mom, not long after the concert, she sent me a picture of something that I wrote when I think I was in kindergarten. There was a poem that I wrote called "Who Am I?" And it's funny because she was like, "You didn't know you did this, did you?" I said, "No." And she took a picture and sent it to me. So I was like, "Wow." But as far as writing Bespoken, I started writing that George Floyd was murdered in 2020. I started writing that in 2018. And but it was nothing in that form. I was like throwing out some ideas. It was very basic. It wasn't Black enough. To me, I was like, this is just too much. I'm looking for too much of approval from my white professors by this Black composer. I was like, nah. So but after George Floyd was murdered, even before then, I had this one song called, what was that song called? It was called, "Oh, How Would It Be?" After the Parkland shooting. And so then what I did was I added a little bit of that. And so it was just one of those things, it always moved. It took on a life of its own. So the end result was a combination of working with like people like Anthony Walker, Scott Cumberbatch, my line brother Travis Gill, who's also out of Jacksonville, um, so it was a process, but the thing is, it's a living work, and because a lot of things are happening, when I do it again next year, it'll be something else. I mean, of course, the foundation will still be there, but you want to make sure that you always speak to the times because there's a quote that Reverend Dr. Wyatt T. Walker said. He said, "If you want to know what Black people are thinking, listen to their music." Because essentially that's where we put all of our experiences.
Oh, that's very poignant. And sort of switching gears, talking more about music, I want to get into your brain as a creative.
Oh no,
So
you don't. Go for
I
it.
I personally like I have been playing music. I like jazz music. I play saxophone and guitar, but I know how hard it is to stay inspired. What do you do to stay inspired?
I take breaks. I take breaks. Because what I realize that when I'm frustrated, it doesn't come out good. Like crazy enough. So the one song that I wrote, "Get Up," which is on YouTube, I heard my boy, um, Tavares. It was during COVID. I was sitting over there in my apartment right across from Notre Dame, and I heard a track that he had on IG, and I was like, "Yo," I said, "Send that to me. I want to do something with it." And so that day, and I've never done this before, but that day I wrote that whole song in like less than 5 hours, and I was inspired by the tune that I heard. Sometimes I can be inspired by the washing machine, the constant rhythm of what you hear going from side to side, the clothes or the shoes inside the dryer. And then if you hear like someone walking and then like the keys rattling in rhythm, like I'm inspired by that kind of stuff too. So there's always something that grabs my attention. And I know my signature as an artist, and of course there are times where it does evolve, but I always try to be open minded. Um, yeah, that's just like where I'm at.
Yeah, I wonder like you have like reached a lot of success. Like do you I feel like when people look at musicians, they feel like you have to be a certain type of way, you have to be really talented, X, Y, or Z, and sometimes they become unmotivated to pursue what they want to do. Do you have any misconceptions about what it takes to be successful, to be a successful musician?
Honestly, success it changes per person. What I once thought was success was something I won't say that it was unattainable because it was not. It was just something that I was looking at from the wrong lens. I, as a student at Notre Dame, I found myself to be successful once I was able to do what I loved, and people who looked like me appreciated that they found a space where they were appreciated, and the people who were not black appreciated the experience of being in that space and that they never had a chance to experience. Eh, Personally, I find success, or I define success by how I feel after something is done. I used to be really numbers driven, which numbers, I mean, of course, numbers is fine, but I would much rather be in a space where I have 20 people who are thoroughly enjoying what I'm giving out versus being in front of 1,000 who are just sitting there and have no idea of what's going on. Because me as an artist, I'm not going to be fulfilled because I'm going to be frustrated because, of course, as an artist, we work off the energy of the audience at times. And if they're dry, that means I got to work harder. But if I have an audience who's actually, vibing with me, then it's like, oh, like we were good and we're making these memories. So success it varies per situation. But I will certainly say that I try not to make numbers the first thing that defines success in my life.
Yeah, that makes sense. And sort of along those lines, success is often combined with discipline. But I
Oh
think a
yes.
lot of people don't associate music with discipline. And I think people maybe have like people just go into the studio one time and just make a hit song.
Mhm.
But really there's a lot of hours that have gone behind that. What
Mhm.
standards do you hold yourself to stay successful?
Man, I was doing this song actually a few weeks ago. I was rearranging Shine Bright. Um, and I was like trying to score it. I was like, okay, let me do something different if I'm going to have a choir do it. And then in the middle of it, I got frustrated because I was like, I don't have the words that I want. I said, it's just not kicking right now. But what I tell myself is, if I can work on a song for at least 5 minutes a day, it could be thinking about it, writing down lyrics, humming a melody, then that is on the road to success. Just because I don't finish a song in a particular time frame does not mean that I'm not being successful. Because what I learned as a professor, and when it comes to planning, as you see, like on my board back here, thinking takes a lot of energy. I never knew how much energy that takes, but that's also part of the planning and process that goes towards success. Um, but yeah, but that helps to keep me motivated, especially if I know that what the end goal is. That's always going to keep me motivated.
Mm. So you talked a little bit about, you had to um, reconcile your standards for success. Were there any other mistakes that you made or that you saw others make along your journey that you took note of?
Mm. Yeah, one of the things that I knew where I failed or didn't succeed was I was looking for approval from the wrong people. I was looking for approval from people who had no idea of what it was like to walk in my shoes, just for the sake of a grade. And so at the end of the day, when that I was noticing that was happening, I was doing a disservice to myself and my community, because it's not our job to make everybody understand us, because not everyone's going to have that. We can give them lectures, we can give them articles, we can give them evidence, but until you become the people or the person that you are trying to understand more about, which of course you cannot, you won't understand it in totality. Empathizing is one thing, but becoming is another. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm curious, to get that mindset, you have to be well read. Do you have any book recommendations for the audience?
Bro, I got a whole list of books. Let's see here. So, a book that I'm start well, it's gonna be for my class. It's called like Preaching with Sacred Fire. But outside of that, though, I have I have the 1619 Project book. I haven't started yet, but I do have that. I was recently for my class. It was my Kanye class. It's called the book is The Cultural Impact of Kanye West, and so it discusses like him as an artist, him as a person, and helps you to somewhat get in his mind from some other authors' point of views. Then also the New Negro by the life of Alain Locke, like that's also something as well too. Uh, but yeah, that's what I can think of right now. But also, like I would always go to my John Maxwell books any day, hands down, because that's honestly what started a lot of my thought processes when I was before I even moved here, having people to invest in me and give me those books. Because I mean, I ain't gonna lie, I'm not a big reader, but I read whenever I need to. But I'm also doing better with reading just because, and that's actually helping me. So I'm forcing myself. I'm forcing myself, but it's
What
working out.
what about John Maxwell do you think stood out to you?
I like him because he speaks directly to me. Because one, I know that I'm a leader, but he says the things in a way where I just get it. Like I think the first book I had was him from him was like 10 Steps to Success or something. It's a small white book with a blue border. Or how no, How a Successful Leader Thinks. There we go. And I remember I taught a workshop on that when I was in Jacksonville. And I'm like, these things really help because it's clear. Anybody can understand it. And one thing about it, I never want to become an educator where all I have are just lofty words and no one understands it except the people who are in higher ed, because that's not fair. But with him, he speaks to the average person. And so that's why I really gravitated to his work.
Wow. Um, so the last thing, if you had one piece of advice that you wanted to leave our listeners with, what would it be?
As you are evolving, don't lose your identity. Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And where can people find you?
Oh, you can find me anywhere. Like you can go to. I mean, I'm on. Honestly, if you type in my name on Facebook, it's Emorja Roberson. I have two pages. There's my artist page. And there's my green. I'm not talking about green one. My personal page where it looks like I'm mean mugging. But you can find me on there. And then my Instagram's Emorja Roberson. YouTube Emorja Roberson. TikTok Emorja. Twitter Emorja Roberson. So I'm pretty consistent across the board. Even my website emorjaroberson.com. EMORJAROBERSON.com.
Consistent branding. We love to see it. Check in the description for all the links to Morja's stuff. Morja, thank you so much for
Thank you,
joining
man.
me. This was awesome.
Well, listen, if anything, I'm proud of you. Especially since watching you for the time that I saw you at Notre Dame, and plus both of us being having a part of our life from Jacksonville. Of course, you were there longer than I was, but just yeah, just seeing you evolve, man. I'm proud, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else you got coming up.
Awesome. Thanks, brother.
Yeah.